Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this great, grand, and glorious world. Welcome to the Awakened Mother Show. I am your hostess, Reverend Wendy Silvers, and you have arrived at the Awakened Mother Show. And we dive deep into the realms of spiritual awakening, human potential, as well as the mystical aspects of motherhood and parenthood. We present raw, unfiltered, boundary-pushing conversations with visionaries, spiritual teachers, wellness experts, and thought leaders who aren't afraid to challenge conventional wisdom. From ancient wisdom traditions to cutting-edge human development research, we leave no stone unturned in our quest for truth and transformation. And today, I am really thrilled to bring to you Twila Brase, who is a nurse, RN, and a public health nurse, and co-founder and president of Citizens Council for Health Freedom, a national patient-centered, privacy-focused, free market 501c3 health freedom policy organization that was launched in 1998 to protect patient and doctor freedom. She's the author of the 8-time award-winning book, Big Brother in the Exam Room, The Dangerous Truth About Electronic Health Records. It's now in its 4th printing. I will make sure in the liner notes that you can go and purchase this book. She has been involved in parental consent for research using baby DNA, the first ever parent baby DNA lawsuit, and a decades-long campaign exposing HIPAA as a data sharing rule. She's founder of a national online directory of direct pay practices known as the Wedge of Health Freedom. I'll give you that URL to you. She also launched the Patient Toolbox, an easy-to-use tool to help patients understand their options in coercive situations and to maintain control over their treatment decisions. During the COVID crisis, she initiated CCHF's Face Freedom campaign and a Don't Be Bullied, Make an Informed Choice billboard campaign. There is so much that I want you to learn about Twila. Her involvement with helping seniors opt out of Medicare and keep their rightful Social Security benefits. This request was successfully included in President Trump's Medicare Executive Order 13890, signed on October 3rd, 2019. COVID derailed the proposed rule, and CCHF launched a campaign in 2024 against the proposed Real ID progressive enforcement rule, which over 3 weeks led to an additional 31,701 public comments by the end of a 30-day comment deadline. So I'm going to bring Twila on to have a conversation about the Real ID, what you need to know, what you can do, and then we're going to also touch on Medicare. So please help me welcome Twila to the stage. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for all you do and for being here.
Well, I'm glad to be here. So I'm happy to be able to talk to your group of friends and followers. This will be great.
Yes. So please help us understand more about the proposed essentially what's floating around the country is you have to get the Real ID. Can you break down what is the Real ID? What can people do? And where are we going?
Sure. So the Real ID is a national identifier. It's a card, it's a system, and it is being imposed against the constitutional rights of this country. And so it is a violation of the 10th Amendment, states' rights, and it's a violation of the 4th Amendment, privacy rights. It was part of a law in 2005, at which time U.S. Senator Lamar Alexander on the floor of the U.S. House said, "This is a national identification card. We've not asked or talked to the Americans about this. I don't know that this is a good idea to do this without any kind of a public debate." But of course, that debate never happened. They passed that law. And then 3 years later, in 2008, they came out with a rule from the Department of Homeland Security. And that is when the states put up their arms against it. 37 states in total either wrote laws prohibiting compliance with this federal national ID card, or they did a I can't remember what it's called, a resolution to oppose the Real ID. And for a long time, that's where it sat. And then Obama came out in 2016 and said, "You can't fly." That was always a lie, but that made all sorts of Americans afraid. They told their legislators, "Fix this problem." And across the country, all 50 states have now complied with the federal Real ID rule and the law and the rule. But 44% of all cards are not compliant. And it is the objective of our organization to make that 46 and then 48 and then 50 and 52 and 60. We just want to drive people away from the Real ID, drive them back to a standard driver's license, which is authorized in 45 states. There's only 5 states that don't let you choose a standard driver's license. And so we want to stop this card, stop this system, stop this federal identification system. And I should say, for people to really understand the importance of this, what the law says is that the Secretary of Homeland Security can unilaterally, not going back to Congress, not going back to the president, unilaterally decide what it is required for. So right now it is access to certain federal buildings, nuclear facilities, and commercial airlines. But even as you know now, people are getting still on with their regular IDs because they haven't managed to impose it on the American people. But the law says that this secretary can decide any new uses that the secretary wants. And we believe the next new use would likely be access to medical care in order to get everyone to submit and everyone to comply. And that's why I'm asking your listeners and your viewers here to make sure that that doesn't happen, to make sure they don't have a Real ID. And if they do, to turn it in and get a standard driver's license.
That's very frightening, giving that kind of power to the Secretary of Homeland Security.
Yes, well, I doubt that a lot of people even know that. You know, most people just think that that card in their pocket or in their wallet is just a simple identification card. But it always used to be a state one, controlled by the state. The state controlled driving privileges, the state controlled identification was all by the state. So this is a federal takeover of state sovereignty and of individual sovereignty. And what people are hearing is that by May 7th, they have to have a Real ID or they won't be able to fly. And this, again, just like in 2016, this again is a lie. And it's a lie for several reasons. One is you don't have to have any ID to fly. And some of your listeners have probably been in that situation at the airport where they lost it, or they had it stolen the day before, they can't find it. And what they've had to do is submit to a questionnaire, essentially, like, you know, what was your first email address, or what was the color of your first car? That's what happened to me when I lost my ID and my money in the airport right before I flew. Oh, and wow. So a lawsuit actually says, the ruling actually says you can submit to a search. So that can happen without an ID. But in addition to that, the TSA has 16 other identification cards and options, including a passport card, a military card, a VA medical card, and others that can be used to get you onto that plane. So we encourage people, go get your standard driver's license. Don't let them impose this national identification system, and use your passport. Just get a passport And a passport card is even better for, a flight around the United States because it's just the same size as a driver's license. And that way, if our organization does not succeed, if you're afraid that we won't succeed, and we are bound and determined to succeed in stopping the Real ID, but if you think we're not going to succeed and you want to sleep at night, just go get yourself a passport. There are other reasons why it's probably good to have a passport. You never know when you might want to leave the country for some reason, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and decide to have to do it at the last minute. Somebody goes to France and you have to go rescue them. You're going to want to wait for, 4 weeks to get your passport. So it's a good idea to have one with international travel these days. And I think maybe the other thing that I should say that's really, really, really important is, in addition to the secretary being able to make that kind of decision, and that kind of decision, by the way, could be things like you have to have a Real ID not only for medical care, but let's just say to purchase a gun, to open a business, to get married, to open a bank account, to rent a hotel. Anything that the secretary decides that you would need it for, you would have to have it for. So it's like I said, it's a takeover of sovereignty. But as important as this is, it's important to know where they want to take this.
Yes.
Right? So they want to take it to digital. The organization called the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, or the heads of all the DMVs around the country, they testified to Congress in December of 2023. And they talked of their plans to digitize the Real ID, starting with 2% of all identification cards being digitized and moving on from there. They talked about having remote and real-time access to the identification credential on your phone. They want to put it on your phone and have government access to your phone, be able to shut that ID off anytime that they want. Turn it on, shut it off, or change it, right? This is not good for freedom in America to have the federal government having that kind of control, or the state governments having that control through the federal government.
That is very frightening.
Well, what we're really talking about is a social credit system here. Paving the way to a social credit system like they have in China, where the phone is how the government controls the people. We should not even get close to setting up such a thing, or, digital transactions or everything else on your phone, and giving the government that kind of power through your phone. And that's where Real ID is going.
So I have a question for you, because in my experience, when you start hearing about something, they've already the people that are behind some of this already have set into motion this thing happen. Mm-hmm. So what can people do to take care of themselves? Excuse me.
Sure. Well, yes, they've set it into motion because, they set it into motion in 2005, and they've had about 6 different deadlines. And in the progressive enforcement rule, it came out January 13th. We opposed it in October. We got all those public comments that you were talking about. We had a 6 pages where we opposed it in a public comment, giving the history of even all the surreptitious stuff being done in the background when people didn't even know. And when states had opposed it, there were DMVs that were going against their governors, against the laws in their states, and starting to build a system behind their back. But there's definitely a real opportunity now to stop it. Because, like I said, 44% of all cards are not Real ID compliant, and 45 states allow you to have a standard driver's license. So despite the fact that all the states have complied, what the TSA talks about is that they don't have card compliance. They have state compliance. They don't have card compliance. So they're doing progressive enforcement for the next 2 years with progressive consequences to try to get you to submit to an unconstitutional federal takeover of identification and transactions and traveling and who knows what in the future, right? So this is your opportunity to stand up as a citizen and say no. And so there are several things to do. Go to refuserealid.org, refuserealid.org, And this is where we explain what the whole situation is in a sort of a short overview. And then we also have several places where you can click to take action. And when you click on those, we have some pre-written messages for your members of Congress and the president, and you can just click to send those forward. We know we've got almost 50,000 emails sent already, but we need many, many more, because members of Congress who are actually concerned about Real ID have said that they haven't been hearing from people. So we need you to tell them that you now know what's going on and you don't want it to go forward. So take action by going to refuserealid.org. And then there are two other things. One is, as I said, go to the DMV. In the 45 states that give you a choice, and I'll list those off, and tell them you want a standard ID. And when you get a standard ID, it will not have a star. A Real ID has a star, a black star, a gold star, a white star, and a gold circle. Make sure that the one you have does not have a star. And then it will say something like, not for federal identification purposes. And that's because the Real ID rule told the states that they have to put those words onto the standard a standard driver's license and standard ID. So then you will know that you have a card that is not a Real ID. And then the third thing you need to do is make sure you're talking to people. Get people to come to refuserealid.org. Get them to understand what they have in their pocket. Get them to engage. Make sure that they know that their freedom from the government could be curtailed significantly if the government has this kind of power over everything that you might need your ID for or your driver's license for.
Thank you so much for taking this on. So important. I remember hearing about the Real ID several years ago and being really cognizant that I didn't want to have a Real ID. And then I literally recently saw it on a bus, your Real ID. And I thought, wow, we've really progressed from where it was just being dropped into people's awareness to where now it's being marketed to people. And they don't understand, if you talk to a young person and you say, don't get the Real ID because it's about tracking, and they'll be like, well, they know everything anyway. What do you say to them?
I say to them, if they ever have to ask you for something or try to coerce you into something, it's because they don't have that something. They have not pulled all that data together. It's not all digitized somewhere. And so this is a brand new system being set up to track everything that they do. And actually the possibility of curtailing. They need to look at China and see how the Chinese people cannot sometimes move out of their house because the Chinese government has told them no, and alarms will sound off. In the Communist Party that's controlling this entire digital system off of their phone. So they have to realize that no, they don't have everything. They might like everything, but they don't have everything. They haven't pulled it all together. And this would pull it all in the future. The likelihood is that this would pull it all together on the phone. Their personal phone suddenly becomes a tool of government control. And that's where this is moving.
That's so, it's really mind bending.
Yes.
It's mind bending. It's beyond, it's 1984. It's beyond to, because I'm not finishing my sentence because it's so mind-bending, but the whole conversation that you hear with people about, well, everything is moving to your phone, where you do everything from your phone. And then we have a conversation like this, where you're talking about how in China, communist China, the government controls people through, I'm pointing over here because my phone is here, through the phone. And how important it is in America, which is supposedly land of the free, home of the brave. We get to be brave enough to go to refuserealid.org and take those actions and educate people about what is possibly coming down the road, but do it now. Sometimes I've experienced people, until it comes right to their door, they often say, not my thing. And I'm like, it is your thing. All of this is your thing. It's really important. It's not afterwards where you say, oh, I wish I would have known. Well, here we are. refuserealid.org. Go there now while you're here listening to Twila, and take those 3 actions. Sign up, spread the word, make sure people know, your loved ones, your friends, make sure they know the options that they have. I also want to ask you about social determinants of health. And then we'll talk a little bit about Medicare if you can.
Sure.
Will you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. And before we leave this topic of Real ID, I do realize I have forgotten to say one thing. There are state legislators that are moving to introduce bills to extract themselves from conformance with the Real ID, the federal Real ID law. So talk to your state legislators. And if you find a state legislator who is really opposed, connect them with us, because we're building a coalition. Actually, a state legislator is building a coalition, and we are helping to build that coalition.
Okay.
So please do that. Now, regarding social determinants of health. Social determinants of health are, if you look up those words on the computer, you'll see lots of diagrams. And so I actually encourage you to do that. Social determinants of health. And then up in the corner, you can choose images. So you can see all the different images that might include those words. Because what you will see is that everything in your life, everything is considered a social determinant of health. And the government and the health plans and others who want data on every little aspect of our life, they are moving to extract this data from you and I in the exam room. So sometimes it's really obvious, like they'll give you a piece of paper and it says social determinants of health. And some of those pieces of paper actually say, you are under no obligation to fill this out. Feel free to opt out. Some of them don't let you know that you can, and it feels like, it's something you have to do. We do have discharge instructions on our homepage under helpful handouts. It's toward the bottom of the homepage, and we have our discharge instructions that help you learn what to do in the exam room to protect yourself from these questionnaires and to not sign the HIPAA form, another subject. But more on the social determinants of health. So your education level, the car you drive, or the kind of transportation, the kind of home that you have, what's your income, what are some behavioral things that you do, what's your social life like, what's your family like, everything that you can think of. Do you exercise? What kind of insurance do you have? All of these things that could help determine at a mental or physical level, are you a healthy person? Are you not a healthy person? But essentially the electronic health record, which we also oppose it. I know you talked about the book that I wrote. So the electronic health record is really becoming the dossier of your life if you let it. The important thing is to make sure you don't let it become that to the degree that you possibly can. And that is that you just don't answer all those questionnaires. You just say, well, I'm here for you to see the infection on my big toe. I don't think any of this pertains to my big toe. Not even, my family history doesn't pertain to my big toe. I'm not going to answer those questions.
So what if they say, because for instance, I just went to a doctor last week and I had to fill out a bunch of digital forms.
Yes.
So, or they wouldn't see you. So what do you say? No, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not comfortable with this. This is not information I want in my electronic health record. I'm not comfortable, and this has nothing to do with my appointment. And then they say, well, we can't continue on. You're on an iPad, right? Well, if you don't fill those out, we can't click send, right? This is like the pressure to get you to do it. And usually what I say is, give me the paper version and I'll decide what I'll fill out and what I won't. And if they say they don't have a paper version, or they say, well, we usually don't do that, we're not supposed to do that, I'm like, well, that's the way that I'll fill this out. And so to the extent that I'm willing to answer those questions, I'll do it on a paper form. And then sometimes they're really obstinate, and then you just have to call for the manager. And then even with the manager, you can say, is the doctor agreeable to this? So the doctor's going to refuse to see me because I'm not going to tell you my entire family history. I'm not going to tell you about whether I use alcohol or how much I smoke. I'm not going to tell you about what I feel about genders or my income. Really? The doctor has approved that he will not see me if I don't share all this personal information with you. And so, you bring the pressure down. And usually, if I've had to get to that point with the manager, which occasionally I do, they just bypass the system, come back and give me the one question that they really need and then let it go. And I am sorry. I'm always sorry to tell people this because you shouldn't. I'm a nurse. You should not have to come into the exam room armed for bear, right? You should not have to. It should be a sanctuary. It should protect you. It should honor your preferences and your requests. It should not exploit you and use you as a data object or use the time of your sickness as a way to exploit that sickness to get this data from you. So I'm very sorry about that. I do encourage people to look at our discharge instructions again on our homepage toward the bottom in helpful handouts and read it. Before you go in, learn what your rights are. Learn to stand up for yourself. Figure out that the exam room, in many cases, is really not about you. It's about the system, and you need to protect yourself in the system.
Wow.
Sorry.
And what about not signing the HIPAA form?
Yeah, don't sign the HIPAA form. And now the HIPAA form comes in 5 different forms, and they're all listed there in the helpful handouts in the discharge instructions. And so there's a variety of ways not to, but in essence, you have to understand what this is. So today, it's often not a HIPAA form. It's simply a statement within a broader consent form. And it says something like this: I have read, or I have understood, or
yes,
I have been given the notice of privacy practices, and you're just supposed to sign it. And if you read the notice of privacy practices, you will notice that it is a notice of disclosure practices. And what you're really signing is that you have read, understood, and received this notice of disclosure practices. And now you understand that you have no privacy in the exam room. That's not what they think. That's not what they tell you. But that's actually what it is. And you can read it yourself by just asking them for the notice of the privacy practices, so you can read all the ways that they are going to share your data without your consent. So by law, you do not have to sign this statement. You can cross it out. You don't even have to initial it. And so what's not on the discharge instructions, but what will be soon on the discharge instructions, is the very best way to handle this. And the very best way to handle this is to go to this website, the HHS website. And that part is, the website itself is on the handout. But you go to that website where it says Notice of Privacy Practices. And then there are 4 bullet points. And those 4 bullet points, the first one says, by law, you are not required to sign this form. And then there's 2 more. And then the bottom one says, your provider, when you refuse, is required to make a note of that. So you do not have to lift a pen or click anything on regarding HIPAA, not at the pharmacy, not at the doctor's office, not at the hospital, nowhere. By law, you are not required to do it. And by law, they are the ones who have to write that you refused.
Wow.
But the very best thing is to put that website on your phone as you're filling out the rest, and you're about to tell them, I crossed out the HIPAA. I don't do the HIPAA because I don't have to do the HIPAA. By law, I don't have to sign that.
Wow.
And then they'll say, well, in our office, you do, something like that, right? Then you just take that little phone of yours with the HHS website on it and say, right here, by law, I am not required to sign this. And if you're going to require me to do this, I am going to file a HIPAA complaint against you for forcing me to violate the law. That usually gets their attention.
Oh my gosh. Well, so this is so helpful. How are you doing, everyone? This is not such great information for you to really take back and reclaim your sovereignty. Has anyone ever explained this to you? No one explained this to me. I'd like to go back to my doctor and go, delete that, delete. Wow, that's just crazy.
But I really must address your delete, because people are wondering, what do I do now? I've signed it, right?
Yeah.
So the important thing to understand is that unless you have a law that is stronger than HIPAA, so HIPAA is not a privacy law. So if you have a real state law in your state, then you are protected by the state law, because the federal law says a stronger state law rules. No state except Minnesota, to my knowledge, has that. And so what this means is whether you sign the form or you don't sign the form, they can share the information. The only benefit to you not signing the form is, one, you have exercised your rights. Two, you have burst the entire propaganda here that this has anything to do with privacy at all. And then three, when you find out that they shared something very confidential that you said, or something very confidential, a lab result, and somebody brings it back to you in another office, because these records are all connected, right? And they say, oh, I see here XYZ. And you're like, what? And then you go back to your doctor and you say, that was private. And they'll say, well, look right here. You signed that you have read, received, or understood our notice of privacy practices. So you know we were going to share the information, and you should not have said it. You should not have told us, because you knew that we could share it without your consent. So these are reasons why you should not sign the HIPAA form. And by not signing, you also let the staff realize that, there's something here that even our attorney is not telling us, that people don't have to sign this form.
So it's so fascinating. So there on that form, it does say, if you want to opt out, you can contact our office. So I can contact the office, or you, if you're listening to this, can contact our office and say, I do not want my information shared, correct?
Well, I'm not looking at your form. I'm guessing this is a broader consent form that you are talking about. And yes, and we actually have on our website, we have let me see, what's it called? It is I haven't looked at the form for a while, but it's retracting your consent. So if in order to get treatment, you have to consent, and then you want to retract your consent for all those other things, not HIPAA, just everything else, you just want to retract it, then we do have a form that you can use that's on our website. But you can also contact them, but that's a boatload of trouble, right? And so if you have a retraction form, you can take it with you to the office. You can have that wonderful, lovely visit that you had, and you can, send it to them the next day, or hand it over to them, or whatever, and then, retract your consent right there. But that has to do with the entirety of your medical record, not HIPAA. HIPAA means you just have to say no the next time. If you said yes, it doesn't matter. Just next time, say no.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for this information. Thank you for talking with us about the Real ID. I would love to speak with you at another time. I'd like to have you come back, and I would love for you to speak more about Medicare, because I've spoken with a lot of people who are very concerned about what is happening with Medicare. What if this sitting president, will Elon Musk take Medicare away in like a minute or less? Can he take away Medicare? Is that what is being proposed?
No, and yes, this is a much bigger subject, and you probably know that we have our Medicare how-to guide that will help people. Yes. They can find that on our website. But he cannot do that, because he cannot erase laws. So these are laws, and even the president can't get rid of Medicare. But the administration can look at the rules that were written and determine and make other decisions about the rules, and put those rules out there and have some public comment on them, and then change the rules. But they can't change the law. That requires Congress. And so Medicare is part of the law, but it is going broke. So
amazing. Okay, so I'm going to speak with your assistant and schedule another date, because I feel like this would be really important for everyone who is a little bit nervous about Medicare to really explore that. Thank you so much, Twila, for all that you do. Thank you for this wonderful organization, Citizens Council for Health Freedom. Thank you for taking the charge to help all of us reclaim our sovereignty in this realm with regard to all the big brother in the exam room, and also Real ID, and then the Health Freedom Minute, which is a program that's heard weekdays by more than 5 million listeners on approximately 870 radio stations in 47 states. In addition to you providing testimony at state legislatures, and you meet with members of Congress and healthcare policymakers. I mean, you are really doing a lot. So thank you for that. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for this Awakened Mother show. We look forward to being with you again. And please check the liner notes for all of the information on how to connect with Citizens Council for Health Freedom and Twila. Have a wonderful day, everyone. We will see you again soon. Bye for now. Bye, Twila.
Bye. Thank you.